There has been a concerted effort to portray Mr. Utano and myself as corrupt. The narrative is compelling, but it's based on untrue allegations. The falsehoods and innuendo have been plastered in the national press. Senior CBSA officials have distanced themselves from us.
It has been conveyed to this committee that I committed wrongdoing. I have not. My reputation and career have been attacked and damage inflicted on both me personally and professionally.
This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
On November 4th, 2019, two young entrepreneurs, Ratika Dutt and Amir Morov, were contacted by Christian Firth of GC Strategies regarding a Government of Canada project. On November 30th, Firth stated, "I had a great chat with Cameron from CBSA, and they will act as fast as they can to get you a commitment." Over the course of our interactions, Firth repeatedly stated that the CBSA was very interested, said Ms. Dutt. Firth repeatedly communicated that Cameron MacDonald would need to receive benefits as consideration for his role and influence in bringing Bottler, their company, to the Government of Canada. Firth stated that MacDonald had then CBSA President John Oswoski's ear, and that for Cameron, it's more than credit. "I just want to be sure that he's taken care of." The principals met with MacDonald several times. During a meeting called by MacDonald on January 22, 2020, at the Marriott Spin Cafe, MacDonald confirmed over drinks with the principals Firth's statements regarding implementation of Bottler as a CBSA pathfinder for the entire Government of Canada-wide implementation. During another in-person meeting called by MacDonald on February 6, 2020, which was also attended by Antonio Utano and others, MacDonald provided precise instructions and wording on how to pitch Bottler to the President to ensure success. During the period, MacDonald continued to provide intelligence to Firth on internal high-level executive meetings regarding Bottler that were above his pay grade. MacDonald provided direct instructions to be provided via Firth to Bottler and the principals in order to guide interactions with other CBSA employees. MacDonald also assigned work delegated to him by his superiors to Bottler for completion at the last minute. Firth regularly asserted MacDonald's influence and insisted that Bottler provide whatever was asked by the CBSA, as Cam has a very big stick and can get what he wants. They know where he's going in the organization and how fast. Over multiple years of interactions with both Firth and the CBSA mid-management, it has become evident that conscious efforts are made by both parties to isolate and control the flow and narrative of information to the CBSA executive leadership. In this instance, the leadership is defined as the agency's president, vice president, and C-level executives. As early as November 2019, while Firth was actively communicating messages from MacDonald to Bottler, as discussed earlier, Firth stated that the Vice President, Doan, doesn't know that we've been communicating back and forth with Cameron. Firth, on behalf of MacDonald, intervened on multiple occasions when Duff communicated important information with Oswoski that was targeted at the ministerial and deputy ministerial levels. Imagine that you are a young entrepreneur. You've been promised by your contact that the sky is the limit. Your concept, your technology can be implemented across the entire Government of Canada because he knows the man. The man works together with your contact to create magic. The man who has contacts, who knows what he wants. The man who owns a chalet. Or is it a cabin?
We don't know.
Picture now that you enter into what you thought was a contract. You'll work hand in hand to create your idea across government. And what do you have to worry about? It's the Government of Canada. But suddenly, things start to go wrong. You complete some work. You complete some more work. But you don't get paid. So you inquire. You do a little digging. And you're concerned by what you find. So what do? You do the right thing. You file a complaint. Because when you file a complaint, it will be taken seriously. It will go through the right channels, and it will be addressed because it's the Government of Canada. or will it? So, Mr. Tanu, what did you do when you received the first misconduct report?
Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, the email from Ms. Dutt on September 27th was not a report, but rather an email. And it raised two issues, as I indicated in my opening statement. One was a delayed payment matter, and the other one was a concern about Bottler's relationship with their partnership between GCS, Dalian Craddox, and Bottler AI. Nothing more. There were no allegations. I've actually provided the email in this package for reference. In fact, I was aware of the email when it first came in and knew that my team was addressing it. And within 24 hours, we successfully resolved the issues. So much so that Ms. Dutt sent a follow-up email, which I also included in this package the next day, expressing her gratitude and giving the nature of the email and the prompt resolution. It wasn't necessary to forward it to my superiors or Ms. O'Gorman.
Then why, Mr. Utano, is Ms. Dutt saying otherwise now, that this was the first instance of her submitting that misconduct report in September of 2021, which apparently you turned a blind eye to?
So, first, I'd like to address the turning the blind eye. That's not true. The facts are right here in the briefings.
Did you escalate it when you received that report? Did you bring it to the attention to the senior office? Pardon me, to the vice president, based upon the procedure as outlined in the senior office of internal disclosure?
We are basically out of time unless you have a very quick yes or no. We'll have to get back to it.
There were no allegations in the email.
Given what you're hearing, and you've heard Mr. Frith's testimony last week, I assume that you heard that on Thursday?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that he's admitted to altering the resumes. You're quoted as saying, let Mr. Frith, let Kirsten do his magic in an email. Would you not send an email like that knowingly that he's altered resumes in a situation like this?
Mr. Chair, I don't believe I sent that in an email at all. I believe I read that for the first time in an article that was written that was written poorly. You know, you might not be able to see this, Mr. Johns, but I took that article. I couldn't sleep, and I read out every single timeline that man quoted and represented it. And I just want to say to people, the CBSA did not. I'll stay here all day, Mr. Johns, so you don't need to worry about your time. We can give everybody 6 more minutes, okay?
No, it doesn't work like that.
We sat here. It was post-pandemic when we did any contracting at all.
Yeah.
When I was supposedly said that was February 2019, before the pandemic. I was talking about them being in a partnership, introduced to me as being in partnership and navigating through the complexities. I wasn't talking about anything nefarious. I wasn't talking about anything bad.
And I don't want to do that to you right now. I'm trying to fix this, and I'm really glad that you're getting a chance to tell your side of the story.
So to both Mr. MacDonald and Mr. Utano, although you've not been sworn to tell the truth, when you attend committee, part of parliamentary privilege, there's a component that you are required to tell the truth. You are required to give us fulsome answers. So I just wanted to put that on the record because I know you have legal counsel present. Both of you have independent legal counsel, is that correct?
We have legal counsel.
Yes. Is it from the DOJ or is it private counsel?
We weren't provided with any support from the federal government when this happened whatsoever, so we had to go get our own support.
That was probably a very wise move on your part because not only is the Auditor General expanding her review, which started off as Arrivecan, but because of the story from the Globe and Mail in early October, her concerns about the same players and the same government agencies, she's expanded that review. But more importantly, the RCMP are investigating, not Arrivecan, they are investigating the CBSA, all the employees, all the executives, including both you, Mr. MacDonald, and you, Mr. Utano, as well as other government agencies. The 3 companies at issue right now, GC Strategies, Dalian, and Coridex, and as to what truly transpired, as to whether or not there was some criminality, all right? So I can understand why you'd want to have counsel. So, putting that aside, you, both in your opening statements, you were very quick to impugn the credibility of the whistleblowers. I call them the whistleblowers, the brave two entrepreneurs from Bottler AI. And you were prepared to actually throw under the bus the press, and particularly the Globe and Mail. So I just want you to be aware, sir, because you use the phrase a lot. Well, these are allegations, and I'm here to tell the truth. I'm going to give you the facts. What you need to be aware of, sir, is that the Globe and Mail that started this investigation analyzed thousands and thousands of pages of documents released pursuant to access to information requests that came from the CBSA. Globe also reviewed extensive documentation compiled by the entrepreneurs themselves, including contracting records and audio recordings of their conversations with IT consultants, and both you, Mr. MacDonald, and you, Mr. Utano. So we have hours and hours of conversations that are actually recorded. So in my view, these aren't allegations. This is fact. This is evidence. I haven't asked you a question yet, sir. Okay? This is my time, and this is how I'm going to frame the question ultimately to you. So I wanted you to be aware of that, sir. Okay? So when we go back to taking a look at why Bottler would have the need to record you, it's very, very clear early on when you take a look at all the stories, is they thought it extremely unusual that it was the CBSA, you in particular, sir, who sought them out, and sought them out not directly by yourself or one of your employees, but rather a middle person, Christian Firth from GC Strategies, because their work previous to this particular engagement was directly with the Department of Justice. They had civil servants. They reached directly out to Bottler. They did the work. They got paid. There was no middleman, no ghost contractor, like we like to refer to GC Strategies. So that I want to bring to your attention, sir. Now, you also claim that it wasn't you who initiated the concept of CBSA engaging with Bottler, that it was actually Firth's idea. So, Firth testified last week. Firth is on record saying that it wasn't his idea, it was your idea, that you had researched it, and you wanted him to approach Bottler. So, both sets of facts can't be true at the same time. You're saying something completely opposite. So who's lying to committee, Mr. Firth or yourself?
Mr. Chair, I don't believe Mr. Firth said that, and I think you can check his transcripts. I think Mr. Firth said that he reached out to Bottler after speaking to a number of CIOs around town. He had talked to me and that he had understood that Bill 65 was important. At the time, there were news clips that CBSA had undergone a whole bunch of sexual harassment claims, and that's why I told him it was one of my priorities. I want to bring your attention, since everybody is talking
Thank you. I don't want to hear about anything else, sir.
Because that is your time, Mr. Brock.
Was GC Strategies named in any legal documentation for the work done with Bottler, Mr. MacDonald?
I wouldn't be aware of any of the legal work done that you're referring to, Mr. Chair. I apologize.
In the official documentation for the project, was GC Strategies listed?
The only official documentation that I am aware of that I had privy to was a task authorization for a feasibility study. There was never mention of a pilot. There was never mention of GC Strategies whatsoever.
So GC Strategies was not named on the task authorization?
Neither is Bottler, Mr. Chair.
But they were subcontractors?
No, on the task authorization is Dalian Enterprises and Curatics. I am not privy to or aware or provided with any subcontracting arrangements. I am not involved in any of the discussions that take place between third-party partnerships.
So you would never know that, were it not for the public reporting on this, that payment to Bottler flowed through GC Strategies? And GC Strategies then took a percentage for their...
I left the CBSA before any of the deliverables or payments would have been made. I wouldn't be aware of how the payment structure or their agreements are anyways.
When did he leave?
On what date did you complete your time at CBSA?
I think it was May the 3rd. I got pulled over pretty quickly, and I didn't go back to my official records, but it was around May the 3rd that I started at Health Canada.
So after Bottler asked CBSA to stop payments because of misconduct, Diane Daly of CBSA demanded payments go through GC Strategies. Is that correct?
I'm not privy to those emails. I wasn't around at that time, Mr. Chair.
So you've said that you're not friends with Mr. Firth of GC Strategies, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you didn't have much to do with him?
I didn't. I've met Mr. Firth 3 times out of an office place in my entire life.
And you see, it appears that you placed a high amount of trust in him to deliver on a project that you deem to be of exceptionally high importance. That's the appearance of it. Why?
Mr. Chair, the only thing I can tell you about my experience and the only time I had worked with Mr. Firth before Bottler was Arrivecan, and I can tell you that the consultants that he brought to the table delivered. And I recognize that not everybody likes the policies of Arrivecan, but we delivered and delivered and delivered. And that year that I was on, we never missed a deliverable once.
In fairness, I would say you delivered a very expensive price tag to Canadians, and you delivered a lot of Canadians into quarantine who did not meet the necessity to have been ordered into quarantine. They were illegally detained. So those are also outcomes for that project as well. We've heard one witness who was caught lying to this committee. The committee that was on full display, and we've heard assertions that there have been others. So we see that there's, based on the allegations that we've heard from Bottler, that there's a network of people not following the rules, that they're breaking the law. That's why there's an RCMP investigation, and you've pushed yourself quite hard against this so that you're not associated with it. I'm very curious about the motives of everyone involved, about the people who would be lying. And so I'm going to ask you a couple questions. I'd like you to respond as quickly as possible, please. Was Mr. Firth honest and truthful in all of his presentation and responses to committee based on what you know?
No.
I'm going to circle back to that. Was Mr. Doan truthful and fulsome and honest? Was Mr. Osowski truthful and honest in his presentation to this committee?
I couldn't say more than I don't know that he really represented or stuck up for the people that I would have expected him to.
Was Miss O'Gorman truthful and fulsome and honest?
I wouldn't think so.
Would you be able to detail for this committee in writing the areas where they were dishonest and not fulsome in their replies?
Yes.
Okay. And would you be able to undertake to provide that to the committee in, what's the standard time, Chair? 3 weeks. Would you be able to provide it within a couple of days, 2 days?
I believe, Mr. Chair, you'll have a lot of it in my submission already, but I will undertake to do it within 72 hours if that's acceptable.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. GC Strategies clearly got a very good deal here, so it really matters in terms of getting to the bottom of this, who made the decision to hire GC Strategies. Now, I understood in your opening statement, both of you said that Min Doan was responsible for that decision. Was my understanding correct?
Yes, correct.
You're both nodding?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Doan very clearly and very explicitly testified before this committee when he appeared on October 24th that they were investigating who, trying to find out who, and to his knowledge, they weren't aware who. So, to be clear, based on your testimony, Mr. Doan was lying when he appeared before the committee.
I don't understand, Mr. Chair and honorable members, how they could be investigating for a year who made the decision on Arrivecan. It's quite clear. And if they had asked anybody on our team, they would have said the same thing.
Okay. Can you provide us with additional documentation to support your version of events? And are there documents that we should request from Mr. Doan that would verify your version of events?
No, the only thing that I haven't provided and I can provide the committee with is some names. I won't say them here, but I can provide some names that can substantiate what I've said here today. And in your packages, I can pull them out if you would like. Mr. Utano can also pull his out.
We're at a bit of a disadvantage because they haven't been able to be distributed yet, and I understand the circumstances around translation, but you would undertake to provide to the committee in writing, but not in public, the names of individuals who can verify your version of events?
Yes.
Okay. You sort of implied that Mr. Doan wanted to make you the fall guy for what happened here. Would that be a correct interpretation of your version of events? That he made a decision and that someone somewhere decided that you two were going to be the ones made to wear this, and therefore not supported by the department and made to appear responsible for the decision. Is that your version of events?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I felt incredibly threatened on that phone call with Min Doan on October the 28th. I talked to my old supervisor and then my boss on Monday and Tuesday morning following that. I think Mr. Utano can tell you that he had a very similar experience with Mr. Doan as well.
So you had also referred to a conversation that was relayed to you, and maybe it was the same one, in which it was reported that Minister Mendicino wanted someone's head on a plate. Could you just explain further why and for what and whose head he wanted?
That was my discussion, and that was the day that Min Doan threatened me. The discussion started off with Min Doan telling me that within the CBSA there was a lot of work going on to prepare for OGGO. This is almost a year ago, and I believe Mr. Mendicino was not happy. Mr. Mendicino wasn't there when Arrivecan kicked off and when all of this was going on, but there was a lot of news about Arrivecan. Min was worried that either he or Jonathan Moore were going to get fired, so he was talking about somebody's head on a platter. And he said because Jonathan Moore had made a whole bunch of mistakes from an accounting perspective, talking about how much Arrivecan costs, it could go his way or it could go Mr. Doan's way because Mr. Doan was the CIO at the time. And then he turned, we were on the phone, but he stopped the conversation and he just said, you know, Cam, if I have to, I'm going to tell the committee that it was you.
Right.
He offered me the opportunity to say that it was Mr. Utano or tell Mr. Doan that it was Utano and myself, to which I said, if you do that, I will have to respond, and we ended the conversation. That night is the night that I wrote him the notes. I stayed up until about 3 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out how I could find some way to meet in the middle. And that's why the notes were written exactly that way, so that Mr. Doan could come to this committee and present without having...
So you're referring to the email you sent, and I was going to ask you about that. So essentially, you were trying to be honest. What you're telling us is you were trying to be honest, but also avoid giving the direct answer that you've given the committee today.
I was trying to give him something that he could work with. He told me he had never been to committee before. Right. I believe his first appearance was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
He was very nervous about it, and I tried to give him some
No
help.
wonder. I mean, the implication of what you're saying is that he made the choice to hire GC Strategies and had some reason for doing so, and also that he came and told the committee that he didn't make the decision, didn't know who made the decision. And essentially, you're telling us that someone's head was going to be on a plate because somebody got rich, somebody benefited from this. Someone's head was going to be on a plate, and he wanted it to be yours and not his.
I believe Min Doan made the decision to go with GC Strategies out of the fact that he had been told that he could not use Deloitte. Deloitte was in the timeout penalty box, so to speak.
Who told him that they were in the penalty box?
Very, very briefly.
My understanding is that that came from above.
Can you clarify what you mean by above?
Mr. Doan threatened you. Exactly, can you clarify why he would threaten you, what the threat was?
So I got a phone call on, I think it was the 27th, from a member of his inner circle. I can provide her name and information to corroborate this. She told me that Kelly Boulanger had told her not to call me, and that Min had been particularly directing his attention towards saying that I was the one that had made the decision that it would be GC Strategies, even though the entire team that was helping to brief Min Doan all the way had not said that. So when I talked to Min Doan the next day, he had already asked me to help him with the committee. So this is why it was a bit jarring for me He was pretty upset. At times he was almost crying. At times he was almost yelling. He basically said that somebody's head was going to be on a platter, and he started between him and Jonathan, and then he quickly switched it to say he was going to say that it was me that made the decision if he was asked.
But he made the decision. Is that correct? He made the decision?
Yes, he made the decision. I brought him 2 decisions. He took one away and told me to go, and I went.
But he
knew it
came
was
to our
GC
committee and said it
Strategies.
wasn't him that made the decision.
Mr. Johns and honorable members of this committee, I have members of my team that came here to support me. If the CBSA had have even just asked my team, they would have known who made the decision. It was clear. Everybody in government knows that DG wouldn't have made a decision like that. And Mr. Doan, I don't know. He was the one that got a non-advertised appointment. I competed successfully in an open competition for my EX4. Mr. Doan, when he was asked that question, he answered it a little bit differently, and you'll have to ask him how he was promoted.
Mr. MacDonald, I think it's very important that you said that Mr. Doan heard from above that Deloitte was in the penalty box, and that is why GC Strategies was selected. That phrase does include some euphemisms that I do want clarity on, though. What precisely do you mean by from above?
Doan was the vice president and CIO of the CBSA. There was only one person who was above him. My understanding is that all the VPs had been told that they could not work with Deloitte until the CARM project was back on track.
So above him within the public service would have been the president, but above that is the political level. So
I did not understand it to be a political decision, but if you're going to be calling Min Doan, I'm sure you can ask him what he meant.
Okay. Would anyone at the political level have been involved in these discussions, as far as you know?
Not as far as I know.
You weren't in rooms where they were?
I was in, for Arrivecan, I was in one meeting with the minister's office. They asked me if it was secure, and they asked me if it was scalable, to which I answered in the affirmative, and that was only one meeting.
At what stage in the process was that meeting with the minister?
Very early, like very beginning.
Was that before or after the GC Strategies was selected?
I don't know that GC Strategies was selected at the time. It would have probably been concurrently when we were kind of going. GC Strategies was not brought up.
Okay.
No contracting was brought up. They just wanted to make sure that it was secure because we were going to be collecting.
But if they were asking, is it secure, presumably they were asking that in the context of a particular application or company.
No, it was because we were taking away paper and we were going to be using digital means.
Okay. It was sort of, I wonder if you could follow up on that point regarding the timeline. So, what do you mean by penalty box? You mean they weren't to receive any contracts? That's what penalty box is.
That was my understanding. Again, Mr. Dunn can explain.
Yeah, it is sort of surprising to me that you would have this kind of informal process of companies being in the penalty box and therefore not getting any contracts, which means other companies get them automatically. Like, is this normal where sort of someone just decides this company or that company is not going to receive any contracts for a while, and we're gonna give them to whoever else bids? I
would say no, Mr. Chair. I wouldn't think it was normal at all, but I will preface that by saying this was like the second week of the pandemic, and there was craziness everywhere. The reason that the sole source and the national security exemptions exist is for emergencies, and this was declared a national emergency. In terms of the decisions around why we could or could not use a particular company such as Deloitte, that was not my decision to make.
Okay, in terms of the time I had left, I do want to probe the point you referred to just at the end about, you said Mr. Doan got a non-advertised appointment. There was sort of an implication in what you said. And I would like you to provide a little bit more on that. Are there certain relationships he has, access points? Do you think his appointment broke protocol in some way? What were you sort of getting at with that comment?
Well, Mr. Chair, the only thing I can say is that it was alluded to or inferred that I had benefited because of Arrivecan at this committee, and that I had gotten a promotion because of my work. And I wanted to make sure this committee was aware that I fully competed in a competitive process that was open and fair, and that I had resulted as being in a pool, and I was selected afterwards. Mr. Utano as well fully competed in a process. The others can speak for themselves as to how they are selected, but my base assumption is that when I left the CBSA, Mr. Doan was in EX4,
Right.
and he was promoted to an EX5, as well as others were
Okay.
promoted in the agency.
And just finally, to put a sharp point on the process of selecting GC strategies. So Min Doan chose, and part of why he made that choice is because Mr. Osowski, who was the president at the time, had told him Deloitte's a no. Is that
I will let Min Doan answer for why he discounted Deloitte. I told you already what I heard from Mr. Doan. I brought my boss 2 options. I came out with one and the decision to go. I went. He was aware that I went forward with it, obviously, because we built Arrivecan and we delivered it. I left about 13 months after Arrivecan was kicked off. Mr. Utano continued it. Mr. Doan was the CIO for the entire time. When this committee started asking questions, Mr. Doan was still the CIO.
So GC Strategies, and there's been references in regards to their mode of operandi and how they act, and they're sort of a two-man show, but they assemble all of the experts to provide for a contract, as they do for Arrivecan. That's not what they did with Bottler. They actually partnered with Bottler to try to come forward with an opportunity to do a big deal thereafter. And I think that's part of the reason that they're upset, because that didn't come to fruition. They also made reference to a cabin or a cottage or a chalet. Is that you? I mean, a lot of allegations are made about your relationship with Firth. Can you explain?
I just want to be unequivocal about this. I've never had a contractor or a vendor or anybody at my house or at my cottage. I have a little cabin in the woods. I go there sometimes, and especially during the pandemic, to just get away from things, as I was working extremely hard. I've met Christian Firth 3 times out of a workplace in my entire life. 2 of those times were after the pandemic and after Arrivecan started. 2 of the 3 times was with Mr. Utano and my mobile development team, and I was there for about 15 or 20 minutes. I have had lunch with Christian Firth 1 time. I paid my own bill after the pandemic before I left the CBSA. That is all the interactions I've had with Mr. Firth. I've only had a professional relationship with Mr. Firth. I do have fairly informal relationships with people. As I've told this committee, people call me Cam all the time. They know that they can reach me. I leave my calendar open. I answer my phone, and I try and be as open and available as I can to employees, staff, peers, and I was asked to work with private sector, so anything new, innovative, anything that sounded interesting, I would obviously be interested in. Mr. Firth had partnered with several different companies in the private sector. He told this committee that he worked with 22 other government departments. He had $40-some million in sales, and he had been fairly successful at doing it. People talk in town. Mr. Utano can testify to the fact that we called a couple of different departments and kind of did a reference check to see if the work was good.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. MacDonald, for clarifying your secondary residence. There was quite an issue last Thursday as to whether or not cabin, camp, tent, chalet. So thank you for clarifying that. Another area I want clarified, sir, and I've listened very carefully, and if you said it once, you may have said it half a dozen times, as well as you, Mr. Utano, in terms of being very unequivocal in your responses that it was Mr. Doan who was responsible for retaining GC Strategies with respect to this Bottler contract. And I just want to confirm that again. That is correct. That is your evidence, correct?
I will try and say it to you as clearly as I can, but I need a minute, and I will give you as much time as you want. I don't have a hard time
Can you reduce it to 30 seconds?
Mr. Doan saw the proposal that I sent him after I received it and
Okay.
asked for a meeting. Mr. Doan had a meeting with Bottler and saw a demo. Mr. Doan told me to get them ready for an executive presentation.
Okay.
I have my notes there in there. The president, the VP of HR, the CFO, and others saw the Bottler presentation. They were interested in it, and there was general consensus that we should go ahead with some work. I worked with my peers at the DG level to develop a statement of work, which was for a feasibility study, not a pilot.
Okay.
I emailed my boss and told him I was using an existing contract, and I sought permission to go ahead, and I received endorsement to go ahead.
Okay. Again, you and Mr. Utano did not specifically seek out GC Strategies to be the ghost contractor, correct?
No, we received a proposal from Bottler and GC Strategies.
The answer is correct.
Correct.
How do you then reconcile, sir, and this is a question to you, Mr. MacDonald, a year and a half after you leave the CBSA, you write an email to Mr. Doan as well as other members of CBSA, Ms. Sabarin, Mr. Utano, and Mr. Bird, October 29th, 2022. And I'm quoting various passages in this particular email attributable to you. You asked me for advice on the key question of why GC Strategies, but I also think we are all grappling with who selected GC Strategies. If you're so unequivocal today, November the 7th, 2023, why were you equivocal on the 29th of October, 2022?
As I explained, Mr. Chair, I wrote that email to Min Doan after I had been threatened. I wrote that email trying to give Min Doan words that he could use at this committee.
Thank you. I'm going to caution you as well, sir. If you don't want to answer this, I can understand your lawyers are present, but there is some really damning information in this email, which in my view, as a former prosecutor, encroaches upon criminal law in terms of interfering with witness testimonies. You're actually specifically coaching them on what to say with anticipated questions put to them. I'll give you some examples. I will start by saying that I'm not personally familiar with GC Strategies during the time in question. If pressed, come on, we want some accountability here. Who decided? How did this company get a contract for almost $9 million? Who made money off of this? Who is getting rich off of taxpayer dollars? Mr. Chair, I stand by my statement, and I don't believe there was a single person, and I'm not actually aware of any rules being broken or wrongdoing. This is not how we operate at CBSA. Why are you coaching witnesses who've been compelled to attend at a committee to tell the truth? What on earth compelled you to give these suggested answers to them, sir?
Mr. Chair, I was emailed by Min Doan a briefing package. I believe it was Wednesday of that week.
Did he ask for your advice on what to say?
He asked me for my help.
Did he ask your advice on what to say at committee?
He asked me for feedback on his briefing.
I'll ask again. Did he ask your advice on what to say at committee, sir? Yes or no?
Generally, yes. And the reason why I can say that is because his briefing package was just full of facts and data, and it had no verbiage. And he commented to me that he did not have the words to use, which is why I wrote what I wrote.
Did someone coach you on what to say today?
I practiced, yeah, I did.
No, did someone other than you coach you on what to say?
No.
How about you, Mr. Utano?
No.
No? Thank you, Chair.
I wanted to go back to something that my Liberal colleague said, and this was the $54 million price tag. Do you agree with that $54 million price tag? Do you think that this application was worth $54 million?
If you're directing the question to me, I left
Yes.
when Arrivecan was at $6.3 million.
Okay.
I believe out of the $54 million, there were things that are outside of IT. $8 million or $7 million went to Service Canada to do things. When I look at the cost over 3 years, I think if you were to look at major IT systems, which I would consider this a major IT system, I would think that it's less expensive than what people are making it out to be. I just want to underline we know everything that happened now, so it's really easy to rebuild something that's been built. It's called like a model. We didn't have a model to follow when we built Arrivecan. They were coming up with things in real time. This started off as a replacement of a piece of paper that cost about $3 each. So when we think about 40 million transactions on Arrivecan, I like to think about it as an overall cost savings
But
to
do
the
you
government of
think
Canada.
the app could have been designed for less money than $54 million?
I think if you had have taken an approach of knowing all of the business requirements when you start, we probably could have saved some money, but we didn't know what the requirements were. We didn't know what waves of the variants were going to be, and we didn't know how to necessarily, well, I'll leave the politics aside. The business requirements came from FAC, and all we were trying to do was streamline the border and get information so that the streamlining of those people crossing the border could be quicker. That was
But
what
what
our
I'm
goal
hearing
was.
you say is that it could have been designed for less money than the $54 million that it was designed for. Did you want to add something briefly, Mr. Gaetano?
So I would agree with that comment in a normal circumstance and not a pandemic. I think so. And number two, and we were on that trajectory of developing our employees to become autonomous in this capability and these skill sets. But it just takes time. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit as we were trying to establish that. So,
Okay. Yeah, exactly. My $9 million to GC strategies, that money certainly could have been saved there. My last question is, Bottler has said, or the principals of Bottler have indicated that senior government officials could potentially be receiving kickbacks, both direct kickbacks as well as indirect kickbacks for both Arrivecan and potentially other contracts as well. Do you have any direct knowledge about senior government officials, either bureaucratic or elected, receiving any form of kickback?
I have absolutely no knowledge of any senior bureaucrat receiving kickbacks. I can honestly tell you that I have never received one, and I competed for my job, as was opposite to the inference that was made at this committee.
and that's my testimony as well. I'm not aware of anybody who's receiving these sort of kickbacks.